Alejandra, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for participating in the City Leaders Learning Community and coming together this afternoon. Our work together is incredibly important and really recognizes the imperative to prioritize our youngest children to support and promote a just, equitable future for our kids, for our communities, our state, and indeed the nation. And it really underscores the critical role that city leaders play. So I really appreciate the question that was posed in the breakouts, and I had a great conversation in my breakout and heard some wonderful insights and thoughts regarding Steve Zimmer. From Steve Zimmer, I talked a lot about the important roles that city officials play in terms of building public will and really leading what needs to be some very hard and direct and honest conversations in the context of racial disparities and inequities. We come to this learning community with a focus on systems change and supporting systems to work better for children and families. And we come to these conversations with you in the spirit of partnership. Our overarching objective, our bold goal, which we call our North Star, is that by 2028, all children in LA County enter kindergarten ready to succeed in school and life. We recognize that is a powerful aspiration. We recognize it won't happen overnight. And we recognize it takes us to do a couple things. It means that we all, as policymakers and partners and funders, we need to start early. So when we talk about early childhood, we are focusing on that very narrow, small window of time from before birth to age 5, when we know that 90% of the brain development is developed, and that is when critical patterns in terms of learning, emotional development, and health is being formed and shaped. It also recognizes that it also requires that we recognize racial disparities and other inequities in child outcomes. We need to be honest and direct about what we know to be true. And that is not all children start from the same place, and not all children have the same opportunities throughout their development. Indeed, we know that the gaps, racial gaps among children take hold as early as 18 to 24 months. And that kids who start kindergarten behind, who tend to be children of color, low-income children, and dual language learners, the evidence tells us those kids typically stay behind. So it requires being honest about racial disparities in child outcomes. It also requires us probing the why. As community organizer Marshall Gann says, charity, quote, charity asks what's wrong, how can I help? Justice asks, why is it happening, and how can I change it? And so that means really digging into root causes and understanding the forces that are holding inequities in place. And fundamentally, it means focusing on systems change. And that's where First 5 LA has really put its marker down relative to the strategic direction and approach our board and has set us on with the staff support and guidance. So for First 5 LA, that means changing systems change. Our thought bubble says that's about changing policy, it's about changing practice, and importantly and powerfully, it's about building public will and changing community norms to support and prioritize our children. Particularly, those young children are facing the greatest gaps in racial disparities and equities. So in our systems change work, from a very big picture perspective, for us to make progress against the goal, along with our partners, that all kids in our county by 2028 enter kindergarten ready to succeed in school and life, it means we focus on 4 broad results for children and families that capture the major systems that we are working with our partners to influence. First, we believe that all children must have access to quality early learning experiences before they enter kindergarten. Second, that children have access to quality and timely early developmental services and supports. Third, that all children are safe from abuse, neglect, and other trauma. And finally, parents have the resources and the information and supports they need to optimize their child's development. We also have some underlying investment guidelines that help us further shape and focus our work, an important guideline of which relates to equity. So as we look at the data, as we disaggregate the data, it means we're looking hard at what are the barriers that are holding some children back, and how do we target our partnerships and our systems change and our investment works accordingly. So in practice, doing this kind of work that we are talking about together as a part of the learning community really is about working at the intersection of multiple systems. It's one of the aspects of early childhood that is so exciting and engaging, and frustrating because it is complex. And working at the intersection of multiple systems, education, child welfare, family supports, health, that is the heart of what local leadership and local officials do on a day-to-day basis. It also means in practice that we have to work in partnership. And we do so, as do you, with parents, with family-serving organizations, with policymakers at all levels, to really make the case for prioritizing young children, lifting up the data that underscores the disparities by income, language, and race, and doing what we can to ensure that systems and supports actually work for those intended, children and families with young children. So we are so appreciative of city leaders such as yourself who are stepping up to be critical partners and leaders in this effort. When we think about elevating and engaging our communities, elevating awareness of critical issues, leading and shaping policy ideas and solutions, influencing and advocating for change at a community level, county level, state and federal, no one is better positioned than the city leaders who are participating in these discussions. So as Alejandro said, just as we are eager to be sharing with you our 20+ years of experience and learning, we are super eager to be learning with and from local officials as a part of this effort. We are deeply engaged already in a number of important ways with municipal leaders, and we are confident that through our work with you here and going forward, we will further deepen those efforts and expand them and accelerate them as possible and appropriate. A number of the ideas or a number of the projects that we are working on as examples of how local officials are really leaning into some of these broader systems change efforts that are so critical to shaping early childhood development and closing the racial gaps and disparities. A couple I would call out. Certainly one relates to a focus on improving access to childcare. With so many children's parents of color being in a position of working in essential services, accessing or inadequate access to childcare has just been absolutely exacerbating the existing disparities that exist in our most important and high-need communities in many ways. So we've been working with local governments across the county to inform local policies that are intended to expand access and to improve efficiencies to stretch the dollars available that much farther. We are working with LA City, for example, on some proposals that have been put forward by Mr. Krikorian and others to reinstate preschool at parks, as well as streamlining early care and education permitting processes. Very nuts and bolts, but really critical to the providers of essential services. We're working in communities to improve the quality of childcare, improve quality in the childcare system. So here we're connecting with local officials, with regional resource and referral agencies, as well as with the county office for the advancement of early childhood to expand provider supports and training. We're also working at the local level to connect neighborhood level data to inform and drive both community solutions and local and broader decision making. So an example here is the work we've been doing in partnership with UCLA around the Early Development Index, or EDI, which is a really powerful tool for lifting up population level data on child well-being to inform understanding of disparities and inequities at a very granular level in communities, and then use that data to inform processes that government, communities, and leaders are facilitating to lift up some very concrete actionable strategies to close some of the equity gaps in school readiness that we've been seeing. So we've been delighted to work in a number of communities, including El Monte, Pasadena, Long Beach, Compton, and the central and south parts of LAUSD. Finally, we've been working with you in working directly with parents who we all recognize are their child's first teacher and strongest advocate. And we are absolutely seeing that in our 14 Best Start community partnerships, which are comprised of community members, local leaders, actively led by parents in terms of really lifting up the priorities that parents see from their parent and community perspective, and shaping and advancing local systems efforts, which are not only changing systems in our Best Start communities, but being used to leverage and inform change more broadly within the county and statewide. And there, the issues they've been identifying are ones right in the wheelhouse of local government in terms of reliable transportation and mobility, parks and open space, as well as food security. And delighted to be working with Cudahy, Maywood, and El Monte as examples there. So we're excited by the work underway, and we're also sobered by the environment within which we are doing this work. The COVID-19 context for this work is really been quite extraordinary, and we know that the widespread stay-at-home orders have had a really profound impact and implications for those families who have, in some respects, some of the most significant needs, particularly families of color. We know they have been most vulnerable to many of the most significant impacts of COVID-19 in terms of economic, depressed economic earnings, in terms of limited or significantly constrained access to childcare, constrained access to basic necessities such as food supports, and really grappling with what we know are the fundamental systemic inequities that have been really laid bare in our education, our economic, and our health systems as a result of COVID, and which have represented significant barriers to our children broadly and Black and Brown children in particular. The investments that we are advocating for in Sacramento and with our county leaders and at the local level, both investments in terms of financial investments, but also in terms of systems change and policy and practice change, are critical to the economic recovery for our community and absolutely critical to closing the gaps that so many of our Black and Brown children are experiencing. So like you, we bring urgency to this conversation, to this work. I am delighted that the team identified the question that they did in terms of what is the role local leaders, and indeed we all can play in terms of really elevating equity in the context of our early childhood work together. Know that First 5 LA is a engaged and committed partner in this effort. We are very much committed to digging into the longstanding inequities in our systems that are holding our children and communities of color back, and looking hard at our own internal practices and our grant-making protocols and so forth in terms of how to ensure we are bringing an equity and an anti-racist lens to our work. We are eager to share that journey with you as we move forward, and we are eager to participate with you on the journey related to the learning community. So we thank you for what you've been doing to date. We want to acknowledge your commitment to leaning into some important, critical, and consequential issues before us. We appreciate your commitment to learning from one another, with one another, and your commitment to doing all we can to improve outcomes for our kids broadly, and most importantly, to advance and achieve equity for our young kids and their families. Grateful to you for your leadership on a day-to-day basis. Thank you for investing your time and talent and energy to this effort. And thank you to our First 5 LA team, led by our community relations folks, as well as UCLA for all of their terrific partnership and collaboration. I hope the rest of your day is enormously successful, and look forward to learning more about how the community learning sessions go going forward, and where we'll have opportunities to continue to work together. Thanks so much.